As Ilara stood on the bridge of her ship, she gazed out at the stars. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: humanity would no longer be ignored. The galaxy had learned its lesson, but it would not be the last lesson humanity would teach. The mockery had begun, and now it was over. The humans were back, and they were stronger than ever. And the galaxy would never forget the day the mocking ended. The battle had ended, but the echoes of war still lingered. The alien fleet had retreated, but the message was clear: humanity was no longer weak. The news spread fast. Across the galaxy, powerful empires, warlords, and trading alliances whispered about what had happened. The humans, the species that had been mocked for so long, had destroyed one of the strongest fleets in known space. No one had expected it. Commander Ilara stood on the bridge of her warship, watching the wreckage of alien ships drift in the void. Her crew was silent, but there was pride in their eyes. They had done something impossible. They had reminded the galaxy that humans were still here. She turned to her officers. "Prepare a report," she ordered. "I want every human colony to know what happened here. They should know they are not alone anymore." Her communications officer nodded and began working. The rest of the crew moved quickly, checking weapons, repairing minor damages, and ensuring they were ready for whatever came next. Ilara knew the battle had been only the first step. The aliens would not accept defeat so easily. On a distant planet, deep within the heart of the alien empire, Fleet Commander Vrax stood before his superiors. His body was covered in injuries, his pride shattered. He had fled the battle, leaving most of his fleet behind. Now he had to explain how a species everyone had considered weak had managed to defeat them so completely. The High Council of the Empire stared at him with cold, unforgiving eyes. The chamber was silent. They were supposed to be nothing. One of the council members finally said, "How did this happen?" Vrax clenched his fists. "The humans were stronger than we thought. They had weapons and technology we didn't expect." Another council member spoke. "You are telling us that the weakest species in the galaxy, a race we have ignored for centuries, has suddenly built ships that can destroy our fleets." Vrax lowered his head. "Yes." The room filled with quiet murmurs. The council members whispered to each other, their faces grim. Finally, the leader of the council, a towering figure with piercing yellow eyes, leaned forward. "If what you say is true, then humanity is a threat," he said, "and threats must be eliminated." Vrax nodded. "I will not fail again." The leader's eyes narrowed. "You will not get the chance. We will send our strongest forces. This time, there will be no escape for the humans." Back on the human warship, Ilara sat in her private quarters, reading reports from across human space. The colonies were celebrating. People who had lived in fear for years now had hope. But alongside the celebrations, there was fear. The aliens would not let this defeat go unanswered. The humans had won one battle, but the war was only beginning. A soft chime echoed through her quarters. A message had arrived. She opened it, and a familiar face appeared on the screen. Admiral Kovac, one of the most respected leaders of the human military. His expression was serious. "Ilara," he said, "we need to talk." She straightened in her chair. "Sir, the aliens are coming," he said without hesitation. "Our spies report that they are gathering their full military force. They won't stop until humanity is destroyed." Ilara took a deep breath. She had expected this, but hearing it confirmed made the situation feel even heavier. "What are our orders?" she asked. Kovac's eyes were cold. "We fight." Ilara nodded. There was no other choice. The mockery had ended, but the real war was about to begin. The battle had ended, but the echoes of war still lingered. The alien fleet had retreated, but the message was clear: humanity was no longer weak. The news spread fast. Across the galaxy, powerful empires, warlords, and trading alliances whispered about what had happened. The humans, the species that had been mocked for so long, had destroyed one of the strongest fleets in known space. No one had expected it. Commander Ilara stood on the bridge of her warship, watching the wreckage of alien ships drift in the void. Her crew was silent, but there was pride in their eyes. They had done something impossible. They had reminded the galaxy that humans were still here. She turned to her officers. "Prepare a report," she ordered. "I want every human colony to know what happened here. They should know they are not alone anymore." Her communications officer nodded and began working. The rest of the crew moved quickly, checking weapons, repairing minor damages, and ensuring they were ready for whatever came next. Ilara knew the battle had been only the first step. The aliens would not accept defeat so easily. On a distant planet, deep within the heart of the alien empire, Fleet Commander Vraxt stood before his superiors. His body was covered in injuries, his pride shattered. He had fled the battle, leaving most of his fleet behind. Now he had to explain how a species everyone had considered weak had managed to defeat them so completely. The High Council of the Empire stared at him with cold, unforgiving eyes. The chamber was silent. They were supposed to be nothing. One of the council members finally said, "How did this happen?" Vrax clenched his fists. "The humans were stronger than we thought. They had weapons and technology we didn't expect." Another council member spoke. "You are telling us that the weakest species in the galaxy, a race we have ignored for centuries, has suddenly built ships that can destroy our fleets." Vrax lowered his head. "Yes." The room filled with quiet murmurs. The council members whispered to each other, their faces grim. Finally, the leader of the council, a towering figure with piercing yellow eyes, leaned forward. "If what you say is true, then humanity is a threat," he said, "and threats must be eliminated." Vrax nodded. "I will not fail again." The leader's eyes narrowed. "You will not get the chance. We will send our strongest forces. This time, there will be no escape for the humans." Back on the human warship, Ilara sat in her private quarters, reading reports from across human space. The colonies were celebrating. People who had lived in fear for years now had hope. But alongside the celebrations, there was fear. The aliens would not let this defeat go unanswered. The humans had won one battle, but the war was only beginning. A soft chime echoed through her quarters. A message had arrived. She opened it, and a familiar face appeared on the screen. Admiral Kovac, one of the most respected leaders of the human military. His expression was serious. "Ilara," he said, "we need to talk." She straightened in her chair. "Sir, the aliens are coming," he said without hesitation. "Our spies report that they are gathering their full military force. They won't stop until humanity is destroyed." Ilara took a deep breath. She had expected this, but hearing it confirmed made the situation feel even heavier. "What are our orders?" she asked. Kovac's eyes were cold. "We fight." Ilara nodded. There was no other choice. The mockery had ended, but the real war was about to begin. The tension in the air was heavy. Across human space, war preparations had begun. Factories worked day and night, producing weapons, ships, and armor. Engineers upgraded defenses, soldiers trained harder, and leaders met in secret to plan their next moves. The humans had survived the first battle, but now the full force of the alien empire was coming for them. On the bridge of her warship, Commander Ilara watched as her fleet gathered. Dozens of human ships floated in formation, their hulls reflecting the cold light of distant stars. They were no longer just survivors. They were warriors, and they were ready. A message came through. Admiral Kovac appeared on the screen, his face as serious as ever. "The enemy fleet has been spotted," he said. "They're bringing everything they have." Ilara nodded. "How long until they arrive?" 3 days, Kovac answered. "We don't have the numbers to fight them directly, but we don't need to. We'll strike them where it hurts." Ilara understood immediately. The humans couldn't win in a head-on battle, but they had other strengths: speed, strategy, and the ability to fight in ways the aliens never expected. "Give me the target," she said. Kovic's screen change, showing a massive space station. It was a key supply hub for the alien fleet, where they refueled and repaired their ships. If it was destroyed, the enemy's advance would slow down. Ilara turned to her crew. Prepare for a strike mission. We take out that station before they reach us. The crew moved fast. Fighters were prepped, weapons were loaded, and plans were set. The humans had one chance to make their move before the full force of the enemy crashed down on them. Meanwhile, deep in enemy space, Fleet Commander Vrax stood on the bridge of his new flagship. The wounds from his last battle were still fresh, but his hatred burned stronger. He watched his fleet, hundreds of warships, each armed with the latest technology. This time, there would be no mistakes. The humans would be erased. An officer approached him. "Sir, the fleet is ready. We will reach human space in 3 days." Vrax's eyes narrowed. "Good. But this time, we do not underestimate them. Prepare for every possibility." The officer hesitated. "There is one concern, sir. We detected unusual movement near one of our supply stations." Vrax's jaw tightened. He knew exactly what was happening. The humans were planning something, but it didn't matter. They were too weak to stop what was coming. Back on Ilara's ship, the strike team launched. Small, fast ships slipped through space, avoiding detection. The alien station loomed ahead, unaware of the danger approaching. Ilara watched from her command seat. On my signal, attack. The mockery had ended. Now, the humans would show the galaxy what they were truly capable of. The human strike force moved like shadows through space. Their ships, smaller and more agile than the massive alien warships, used stealth technology to avoid detection. Their target was the alien supply station, one of the largest and most important refueling hubs for the enemy fleet. If it was destroyed, the aliens' advance would be crippled. Commander Ilara sat in the command chair of her warship, watching the operation unfold. On the screens in front of her, she could see the human fighters weaving between asteroids, staying hidden from enemy sensors. The station itself was a massive structure, floating in the darkness, its energy shields glowing faintly. Huge transport ships were docked along its sides, refueling and preparing for the coming war against humanity. A voice came through her earpiece. It was Lieutenant Kieran, leading the strike team. "We're in position, Commander, awaiting your orders." Ilara took a deep breath. There was no turning back now. "Proceed with the attack." The human ships moved in. The first wave launched high-powered missiles, striking key points on the station's defenses. Explosions erupted across the hull, sending shockwaves through space. Before the enemy could react, the second wave of human fighters closed in, targeting the station's power systems and docking bays. Inside the alien station, alarms blared. Soldiers and engineers ran in panic, trying to activate defenses. But the attack was too fast, too precise. The humans had caught them completely off guard. On the alien flagship, Fleet Commander Vrax watched in rage as reports flooded in. His supply station, one of the most critical points in the entire war effort, was under attack. His officers looked at him nervously, waiting for orders. Vrax's claws dug into the armrests of his chair. "Send reinforcements. Now." His fleet was still 2 days away from human space, but he couldn't afford to lose the station. If the humans succeeded, his ships would be stranded without fuel. They would be easy targets. Meanwhile, inside the station, chaos erupted. Human special forces had landed, moving swiftly through the corridors. Their mission was clear: plant explosives at key points and escape before the station was completely destroyed. Sergeant Davis led the team through the dimly lit hallways. Alien soldiers appeared around a corner, firing energy weapons. The humans ducked behind cover and returned fire. The battle was fast and brutal. The aliens, still in shock from the sudden attack, were uncoordinated. One by one, they fell. "Move," Davis shouted as his team pressed forward. They reached the main power core, a massive structure glowing with blue energy. Plant the charges, he ordered. His soldiers worked quickly, attaching explosive devices to the core's structure. Once detonated, the chain reaction would rip through the station, tearing it apart from the inside. Back outside, the battle in space intensified. Alien warships scrambled to defend the station, but the humans were too fast. They struck hard and disappeared before the enemy could lock onto them. Ilara watched it all unfold from her warship. The plan was working, but time was running out. The longer they stayed, the greater the risk. Lieutenant Kieran, what's your status? Charges set, Commander. We're on our way out. Just as he spoke, enemy reinforcements arrived. A dozen alien cruisers dropped out of hyperspace, weapons charged and ready. The battlefield was suddenly filled with deadly firepower. Ilara clenched her jaw. They needed to get out. Fast. All units, retreat immediately. Inside the station, Davis and his team ran through the corridors as explosions shook the structure. Pieces of metal fell from the ceiling. Fires erupted, and the air was filled with smoke. The humans reached their shuttle just as the station's internal defenses activated. Automated turrets whirred to life, spraying energy rounds at them. A soldier screamed as he was hit, falling to the ground. Davis turned, fired a shot that destroyed the turret, and grabbed the wounded man. You're not dying here. Move. They stumbled onto the shuttle as enemy ships swarmed outside. The human fleet provided covering fire, blasting alien fighters out of the sky. Kieran's squad raced through the battlefield, dodging enemy fire as they made their way back to the fleet. The enemy station, now covered in flames and explosions, was seconds away from complete destruction. Detonate the charges, Ilara ordered. From a safe distance, Davis pressed the trigger. The alien supply station erupted in a blinding explosion. The shockwave rippled through space, tearing apart the remaining enemy ships nearby. The humans had done it. The heart of the enemy's supply line was gone. On his flagship, Vrax watched in horror as his station was reduced to floating debris. His fleet, already on its way to human space, now had no way to resupply. Their entire strategy had collapsed. The bridge was silent. Every officer on board could feel the shift in the war. The humans had struck a fatal blow. Vrax slammed his fist against the console, his rage barely contained. They think this changes anything. They think they've won. His voice was low and dangerous. Fine. If they want war, I'll give them war. Ilara and her crew watched from a distance as the remains of the station drifted through space. They had won this battle, but she knew it wasn't over. The enemy would not stop. They would come back, angrier and more determined than ever. But for the first time, humanity had struck first. Ilara turned to her crew, her voice calm but firm. We've sent our message. Now we prepare for what comes next. The war was far from over. The real fight was only beginning. The destruction of the alien supply station sent shockwaves across the galaxy. News traveled fast. Every major power in known space heard the same story. Humans had not only survived the first battle, but had struck back with terrifying precision. Some species saw this as an act of defiance. Others saw it as a warning. But to Fleet Commander Vrax, it was an insult that could not be ignored. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, his sharp claws tapping against the metal railing as he watched the wreckage of the destroyed station on the screen before him. His forces were stranded. With no refueling point, his fleet would be forced to slow down, making them vulnerable to attack. Supplies were already running low, and morale was shaken. His officers stood in nervous silence, waiting for his command. One of them finally spoke. "Commander Vrax, what are your orders?" Vrax's eyes glowed with fury. "We adapt. We are not turning back. If we can't refuel, then we will take what we need. If humans want to play war, then we will show them true destruction." The officer hesitated. "Sir, without proper supplies, our advance." Vrax's claws lashed out, striking the officer across the face. The alien crumpled to the floor, groaning in pain. The rest of the crew stiffened, not daring to speak. We will press forward, Vrax growled. But now we fight differently. He turned toward the holographic map of human space. Begin raiding their outer colonies. Attack their trade routes. Starve them of resources. Let them feel fear. The room was silent for a moment. Then the officers nodded in agreement. Prepare the fleet, Vrax commanded. The humans have had their moment. Now, we break them. Back in human space, celebrations were short-lived. The fleet had returned victorious. But Commander Ilara knew that victory came at a cost. The enemy would not retreat so easily. Reports were already coming in. Attacks on human outposts, civilian ships disappearing, colonies falling silent. The aliens were striking back, but not in open battle. They were targeting the weak, avoiding military confrontations, and instead waging a war of terror. Ilara stood in the war room of her flagship, staring at the map of human space. Red markers blinked across several systems, places where ships had been lost, stations attacked, or communications cut off. Admiral Kovac's voice came through the holoscreen. They're trying to bleed us dry, Ilara. They know they can't win a direct fight, so they're turning this into a war of attrition. Ilara folded her arms. And how do we stop them? Kovac leaned forward, his expression grim. We take the fight to them again. But this time, we need to be smarter. They expect us to play defense, to spread our forces thin trying to protect every colony. Instead, we hit them where they don't expect it. Ilara narrowed her eyes. You have a target in mind. Kovac nodded. A new image appeared on the screen. A heavily fortified alien fortress world. This is Ankara Prime, he said, one of their main command centers. If we take it, we disrupt their entire operation. No more raids, no more terror attacks. We force them into a real battle. Ilara studied the map. Ankara Prime was deep in enemy space, surrounded by defenses. It wouldn't be easy. But if they succeeded, it would change the course of the war. It's a high-risk mission, she said. Kovac smirked. That's what humans do best. Ilara exhaled slowly. Then she turned to her officers. Prepare the fleet. We're going hunting. The human strike force moved quickly, using secret routes and stealth tactics to avoid detection. Every pilot, soldier, and officer knew the stakes. This wasn't just another battle. It was an attempt to cripple the enemy at its core. Days passed in silence as the fleet made its way through the void, passing through asteroid fields, abandoned stations, and old battlefields from wars long forgotten. Finally, they reached their destination. Ankara Prime loomed ahead, a massive armored world covered in defensive turrets, energy shields, and docking stations for alien warships. It was a fortress in every sense of the word. Ilara stood on the bridge, her heart steady. All ships move into attack formation. The human fleet spread out, ready to strike. But just as they began their approach, alarms blared. Commander, a voice shouted. They knew we were coming. It's a trap. Out of the darkness, hundreds of alien warships emerged. They had been waiting. The humans had walked right into an ambush. Ilara's blood ran cold, but fear wasn't an option. All ships, prepare for battle, she ordered. The trap had been set, but the humans weren't done fighting yet. The battlefield erupted into chaos. Alien warships, already positioned and ready, opened fire the moment the human fleet arrived. Bright streaks of plasma and laser fire filled the darkness, turning space into a storm of destruction. The human fleet, caught in the ambush, had no choice but to fight their way out. Commander Ilara gripped the armrests of her chair as her warship rocked violently from an enemy blast. Sparks flew across the bridge. Warning sirens blared. Shields holding at 60%. An officer reported. Ilara didn't hesitate. Return fire. Target their command ships and disrupt their formation. The human fleet adapted quickly. They were outnumbered, but they had something the aliens didn't: experience in chaotic battle. While the enemy focused on overwhelming numbers, Humans used strategy and quick maneuvers. The first human squadrons darted through the battlefield, avoiding direct engagement with larger warships and instead focusing on disabling key enemy vessels. Missile barrages struck the alien cruisers, targeting engines and weapon systems. Some enemy ships lost power, drifting helplessly as human strike teams picked them apart. But the aliens weren't just standing still. The enemy fleet, despite their initial surprise attack, fought back hard. Swarms of fighters poured out of massive carriers, surrounding human ships in deadly crossfire. The shields of one human destroyer collapsed under the onslaught, and within seconds, it was torn apart by a brutal explosion. Ilara gritted her teeth. Every loss was painful, but she couldn't afford to hesitate. Focus fire on their command centers. We need to break their coordination. She turned to her tactical officer. Where's our ground team? A holographic screen flickered to life, showing Sergeant Davis and his strike force. They had already landed on Ankara Prime, fighting their way through the enemy stronghold. The mission was simple: disable the planetary defense systems, allowing the fleet to launch a full-scale assault. But things weren't going as planned. Commander, Davis's voice crackled over the comms. We've hit resistance. Heavy enemy forces. We're pinned down near the main control tower. Ilara clenched her fists. If they couldn't take down those defenses, the fleet would remain trapped in space, fighting a losing battle. Hold your ground, Sergeant, she said. We're sending reinforcements. She turned to her crew. Launch ground support teams. Get our soldiers the backup they need. Down on the planet, Davis and his team were locked in brutal combat. Alien soldiers poured into the corridors, forcing the humans into tight defensive positions. Bullets and plasma fire filled the air. Explosions shook the walls. Davis crouched behind cover, his rifle hot from continuous firing. We need to push forward, he shouted. One of his soldiers pointed to a narrow maintenance tunnel. We can flank them through there. Without hesitation, Davis led his team into the tunnel. The narrow space forced them to move single file, but it also kept them hidden. They emerged behind enemy lines, catching the aliens off guard. Within moments, they stormed the control tower, gunning down the remaining defenders. Davis rushed to the control panel and planted explosives. Charges set. He activated his communicator. Commander, we're ready. Ilara didn't waste a second. Detonate them. From orbit, the human fleet watched as fire erupted across Ankara Prime. The planetary defense systems flickered, then collapsed entirely. The energy shield protecting the fortress shattered like glass. The humans had done it. The planet was vulnerable. Ilara seized the moment. All ships, full assault. Take the planet. The human fleet roared forward, unleashing everything they had. With the shields down, their weapons struck deep into the enemy stronghold. Massive explosions tore through alien infrastructure. Entire buildings collapsed. The enemy forces, now leaderless and disoriented, began to retreat. On the bridge of his flagship, Fleet Commander Vrax watched in horror as Ankara Prime, one of the most heavily fortified worlds in his empire, fell before his eyes. His forces had been outmaneuvered. His ambush had failed. For the first time in his life, he felt fear. This isn't possible, he muttered. An officer turned to him. Commander, we must retreat. If we stay, we'll be annihilated. Vrax's claws trembled with rage. He had underestimated the humans. He had thought them weak, fragile. But they had proven him wrong. Again. With no choice left, he gave the order. Pull back. All remaining ships, retreat. Across the battlefield, the alien fleet broke formation and fled. Their warships, once so dominant, now ran like prey before a predator. Ilara watched as the enemy ships vanished into the void. The battle was over. Ankara Prime was theirs. The war wasn't won yet. But today, humanity had struck a blow that the enemy would never forget. The war was not over, but the tide had shifted. The fall of Ankara Prime sent a ripple of fear through the enemy ranks. What was once thought to be an invincible stronghold had been reduced to rubble by human hands. The message was clear. Humanity was not just surviving. It was winning. Commander Ilara stood on the bridge of her flagship, gazing at the holographic display of the battlefield. Fires still raged across the surface of Ankara Prime. Alien wreckage floated in orbit, the remains of a once mighty fleet now scattered like debris in the void. Reports poured in from across the system. Human troops had secured the planet's major control centers. Enemy resistance was collapsing. The remaining alien soldiers were either surrendering or fleeing into the wildlands, where they would be hunted down in the coming days. A junior officer approached. "Commander, our forces have taken full control of the enemy's war archives. We're transmitting the data now." Ilara's eyes sharpened. "What did we find?" The officer hesitated. "It's worse than we thought. They weren't just attacking us out of fear. This was part of a larger strategy. The enemy believed that if they could crush us now, they could prevent us from ever becoming a major power." Ilara exhaled slowly. So that was it. The aliens had seen humanity as a threat, not because they were weak, but because they had the potential to become something far greater. She turned to her tactical officer. "Admiral Kovac, what's our next move?" Kovac's face appeared on the main holoscreen. He looked exhausted, but there was a fire in his eyes. "We don't stop here. The enemy is retreating, but they're not defeated. If we give them time to regroup, they'll come back even stronger." Ilara nodded. She had known from the beginning that this war wouldn't be won in a single battle. Humanity had to keep pushing. A new transmission came through, this time from Sergeant Davis on the surface. His armor was scorched, his face smeared with dust and blood. But he grinned as he spoke. "Commander, you're gonna want to see this. We found something in the lower vaults of the alien fortress." Ilara frowned. "What is it?" Davis turned his camera, revealing what looked like an ancient chamber. Strange symbols covered the walls, glowing faintly in the dim light. In the center of the room stood a massive device, something clearly not of the enemy's design. It pulsed with an eerie energy, as if it were still alive. Davis continued, "This isn't theirs. The aliens didn't build this thing. They found it." Ilara leaned forward. "Then who did?" Davis hesitated before answering. "We don't know. But according to the records we recovered, this machine, it's a weapon. A powerful one. And if the enemy had fully activated it, we wouldn't be standing here right now." A heavy silence filled the bridge. Ilara exchanged a look with Kovac. If the enemy had a super weapon in their possession, it meant they had been preparing for something far worse than just a war against humanity. She straightened, her voice firm. "Secure the device. I want every scientist we have studying it. If it's a weapon, I want to know how it works. If it's a threat, I want to know how to destroy it." Davis nodded. "Understood." The transmission ended, and Ilara turned back to her crew. "This war isn't over. We didn't just win a battle. We uncovered something bigger. The enemy has secrets, and we need to uncover every single one." She took a deep breath and gazed out at the battlefield one last time. The galaxy had mocked humanity. They had seen them as weak, as a race to be crushed before it could rise. But now things had changed. The mockery had ended, and the real war was just beginning.